I am truly honored and humbled to be selected as the 2025 Rebecca Blank Fellow. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the Academy and to those who nominated me for this distinguished award. Becky was an inspiration to me, as she was for many of us gathered here today. And that inspiration continues to this day as I reflected on the prompt that Tom provided to us. The motto for Bishop Dwenger High School in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the Catholic school I attended, is Citizens of Two Worlds. The motto reflects the school's dual mission of developing young people in their spiritual relationship with God, as well as in their civic responsibilities to the wider public in which they live. Like Becky before me, I have used my faith as a guide in my academic pursuits to better understand the causes and consequences of poverty and inequality and the design of public policies, solutions to improve the lives of the disadvantaged and forgotten. In addressing a group of students at the University of Wisconsin, Becky referred to this as living consciously in both worlds. It's in this vein that I want to riff on my high school motto. In order to help restore trust in social science evidence, I believe academic social scientists need to be scholars of two worlds. First, as members of our academic disciplines, producing rigorous evidence on questions that matter. And second, as engaged members of our wider polity, translating that research evidence in a non-technical fashion for politicians, thought leaders, and the public at large. This is not the same thing as being a scholar advocate, where the lines between scientific inquiry and political dogma get blurred. Rather, I believe translational scholarship retains the same level of rigor demanded in our peer-reviewed publications, but disseminated in a fashion that meets the public where it's at. Back in 1992, Congressman Lee Hamilton of Indiana published an article in the Journal of Economic Perspectives on the role of the economist as a policy advisor. At the time, he was chair of the Joint Economic Committee, and he actually happened to be my congressman at that time. He stated, and I quote, and bear with me, it's a long quote, "For me, the most important quality for economists to have when they are testifying or advising policymakers is the ability to express their ideas on important policy issues clearly and simply, without jargon. I am most emphatically not asking that economists give overly simple or simplistic advice. In fact, one of the most useful roles an economist can perform is to remind policymakers that the economy is complex, that we must be keenly aware of the unintended consequences of our actions, and that choices must be made amongst competing objectives. We politicians don't always want to hear these things, but it is important that we do. That is why it's important that we hear them in a language that we cannot ignore as vague or incomprehensible." End quote. I believe Congressman Hamilton's advice applies doubly so in today's highly partisan and toxic climate. In the 2018 book, The Government's Citizen Disconnect, published by Russell Sage while Sheldon was president, the political scientist Suzanne Mettler highlights the seeming paradox that as more and more Americans have come to rely on one or more programs in the social safety net, and that as inflation-adjusted spending on such programs has exploded, basic trust in the government institutions underlying those very programs has eroded. She hypothesizes that this contradiction stems in part from the voices of a very few well-organized and well-funded lobbying organizations opposed to government spending, drowning out the too rare voice of those who directly benefit. I'd like to add to Professor Mettler's list that we also suffer from too few voices of those of us who study the programs. Now, I'm not pointing fingers in this room because this is the example that you set for the profession. Rather, I believe that in general, to restore trust in evidence-based policy, we need to be upfront and highlight when evidence points to a program or policy working, when that evidence suggests that it's not working, and when there's simply not enough evidence to confidently say one way or another on its effectiveness. But we must engage, whether it be in helping a reporter meet a deadline, in writing a non-technical policy brief or op-ed, in doing a podcast, and testifying before a state, local, or federal committee, or actually serving in government. The anti-government, anti-science forces that have been effective in part by co-opting a motto from the 1970s environmentalism movement to think globally but act locally, where they've stacked local school boards and city councils, state legislatures, and now the presidency and Congress. This suggests that in order to reestablish trust in government and in science, it will be necessary to engage in all of those same levels of society today. The headwinds we face are strong, and it is tempting as an academic to close our doors and retreat to our first world of scientific inquiry only. But I hear Becky imploring us to live consciously in both scholarly worlds, and I hope that we rise up to the moment. Thank you.